Hey, what's up, players? Shikara and I back again, and we're going to do another in our series for another server drop, and we're going to be popping a Vulnversity today. So this is off of TryHackMe, and they get a really good series of different capture the flags. And if you're just visiting for the first time, what I do with this series is I take some CTFs and we do a walkthrough. So spoiler, it will be a walkthrough, complete walkthrough of this particular CTF. But I slow down things a bit as opposed to just kind of barreling through as a normal, walkthrough or whatever. I like to kind of teach the methodology behind how we would attack this machine or pop the box. And I would like to go ahead and also say, like with my commands, if I do a particular switch or whatever, I want to kind of explain why I'm doing that and the order I'm doing things in, things like that, so that you can learn a lot more from doing these CTFs other than just, popping and getting the flag and chalking up a badge for yourself. This is to teach you some good cybersecurity concepts. So if you notice, well, you will notice that if you watch some of my previous videos in the series, I go upon the assumption that you haven't watched those, and if I explain something in the previous video, I'll explain it again in this video with the assumption again that you're just watching this for the first time. All right, so let's get popping, baby. So we got Vulnversity. So TryHackMe, really great site for doing this sort of thing. They have a free version, and then they have the $10 a month, which gives you more rooms, gives you your own built-in the browser Kali Linux, which is pretty awesome. So I do subscribe to it. I think it's a great service. And we're going to utilize some of the questions in here, but for the most part, there's two flags we're trying to capture in this one here. Now, something else, and again, I still haven't made this video, but I am going to make this video. I use this Dratus Community Edition installation here for the methodologies part of it. And it's typically being used for, this product is typically used for uploading pen test and summary of findings and reporting and things like that for pen test engagements. But for me, I just use it as a cheat sheet because I just don't like typing. I like to be able to just copy and paste. So this is my cheat sheet, as it were. So I kind of just assembled these commands. This is still a work in progress, like with the Nmap one. It's not entirely full. I still have some other ones I want to add to it. And I should probably order these in alphabetical order because it's all a mess looking for them. Anyways, so something like this Nmap here, it's very easy for me to be able to just go ahead, copy and paste that into a command. So it's my cheat sheet for capture the flags. Makes things go by a lot quicker, especially when doing these videos because I fat finger a lot. All right, so let's pop on through now. What I did in this particular one, because I noticed that when I run Nmap, this particular one here, on most of these VMs, it takes forever to do it. And there is some reasons for it, being that it's an aggressive scan and it's actually running 4 different scans, but it still takes a long time. So I actually ran it ahead of time, which is right here. And I didn't do the TAC capital A. So if you're not familiar with what Nmap is a port scanner. And a port is an entry point into a computer, the 65,535 ports. And because you count 0 as a number, the first 0 through 1023 are considered well-known ports, like port 80 for HTTP, port 22 for SSH, and so on. And then you also have from the 1024 on up to about 49,000 are registered ports. Like if a Cisco or something has a particular application that needs a particular port, they'll register it with a company called IANA. And then after the 49,000-ish area on up, that's going to be dynamic ports that are created on the fly from my computer going to that server. So Nmap allows me to scan ports from a server to see what ports are open that I could possibly attack. In this case here, we can see they got port 21, which is FTP, 22 SSH open. The 139.445 tells me there's some SMB going on here as well. Let's see, 3. Oh, interesting. So there's no web server in particular, but that 333, I don't know what that is. So what we'll do is this: if we don't know what something is, now I'm guessing this is the SUID proxy here, and I think that's actually one of the questions on this walkthrough here. Reconnaissance, yes, SUID proxy. they want to know the version running. To do that, you would do an S(V) for Nmap to be able to get that. But I'm not really concerned with that because we're actually not going to use that today. But I do want to find out what that 333 is. So what we'll do is we'll visit the website and we'll add port 3333 to the end of it. Because if it's not a standard port 80 and it is a web server, we would need to put the 3333 in there to actually visit it. So let's put that colon and let's just see what it is. All right, so it looks like it is a web page. All right, so we now know there is a web server running on this IP address, but it's at a non-standard port of 3333. Okay. First, we just check and see if there's anything outstanding here on the page that would kind of get our hackles up and want to know if anything's going on. Looks like a pretty generic page. Not a whole lot of things going on. A lot of happy people. Look at this guy. He's super happy, ready to rock. Yeah, so I don't really see too much going on here. I'll scroll down to the bottom, see if it's powered by WordPress or something. Nope. Okay. All right. So yeah, it looks pretty generic. I don't really see anything that just pops out. Another thing you could do is right-click and view the page source. And what you would look for is like comments, because sometimes these developers may put a comment in there that could possibly actually put a password or a hint to what the password may be for SSH or something to that effect. But yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything too outstanding here. I don't see any comments or anything. Oh, there's a comment. So this would be an example of what a comment looks like right here. So you would always kind of look at that, see if there's anything of interest to you. But I don't think we're going to find much on this web page for stuff. So what we can do is we can do something called the directory bust. And what that basically means is you're going to take the IP address :3333 / and you're going to say, is there any other paths that go there? For instance, if I were to go back there and do that, there is a typical file that a lot of websites will employ called robots.txt. And the idea of that is if we have crawls out there like Google, the Google bot, the Bing bot, things like that, to index sites, if there's a path that I don't want those bots to index for my site, I would put them in a robots.txt text file, put it in my web root, and I would basically tell it to disallow indexing those paths. So to a hacker, that's always a good thing to look for first to see, hey, is there a path called /secret? That would be interested to me. So one thing you can do is say robots.txt. Not everybody has it. In this case, these guys don't have it. But for the directory busting, what we're trying to do is we're saying, hey, I want you to replace this with a word list that I have of common paths like admin, login, WP-login for WordPress, those sort of things, and go down through this massive list that we have and see if there's any directories that would be of interest to us. Okay? So to do that, we're going to use a tool called Gobuster. Now, there is another tool called Durbuster, which a lot of people like to use. To me, I find it to be slower than Gobuster, but we are going to use a Durbuster word list because those are actually pretty good. So to do that, I'm going to go back here to my sweet little cheat sheet because I don't like typing crap in. And let's find my directory busting. Boom! This would be so awesome for you guys to set up something like this because it would make your life so much easier and quicker doing these, monotonous tasks that you're going to do every single CTF. All right, so I'm going to grab this and I'm going to tell you what this command is and what the switches mean after we run it, okay? So let's pop it in and I'm going to change the IP address to our current IP address that we have. And don't forget the :3333 because that's the one it's on. Now, I wouldn't have to put that if the actual web page was on port 80 because that's just the common port, okay? So let's go back here and grab the IP address. There it is. And we're going to put that in, and then we're going to put the :3333. And we're going to let that run for a second. Now, while that's running, let's go back and take a peek at the command itself. So what it's doing here in this case is I'm setting Gobuster to run in directory busting mode because there's other modes that it can run in. So I'm saying dir. It's different than what it was in the past. So if you used Gobuster in the past, you didn't have that as an option that you needed. Now you do. The TACU is the URL, in this case, whatever the URL is, or the URL colon, port that's odd. The TACW means, and when I say TAC, by the way, I mean dash. The TACW is for the word list that we're going to use. And in Kali Linux, there is a word list directory under Durbuster, and this is a really common one to use, this medium.txt. We didn't use this because we don't really need it right now for this. I just want to find directories. But if I wanted to find like connect.inc, for instance, right, I could put that as an extension that I want. So the TACX means an extension. And if I want to look for database inc files, I would add in inc there, right? So in this case, not too worried about it for right now. Let's just stick with the directories and see if anything cool comes up. Let's go pop back over here. All right, looks like we got some, let's see. I'm cocking my head a little bit because my light's in the way. I'm going to stop this because it actually looks like an interesting one here, internal. That looks pretty interesting to me. So let's go pop over and let's see what is there. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this and put internal. And let's navigate there. Look at that. All right, so we got an upload page. Awesome. So a lot of times what they'll do for developers is they'll set limits and types in directories that they actually allow, or extensions, I'm sorry, not directories. And they'll say, listen, you can only upload a GIF or JPEG or image files. So if I uploaded a text file, it would say, no, you can't do that. Sometimes they'll do it as a blacklist. If they do it as a blacklist, we can probably get them after that, because when you make a blacklist, you're basically saying you're not allowed to upload these set of extensions. But there's so many extensions out there that you have to continually keep adding to this blacklist over and over and on and on and on. The absolute best way to do things for security when it comes to filtering or input validation is use a whitelist, saying you can only use this extension, this one, and this one, right? That pretty much blanket blocks everything else and just says this is the only thing allowed. That is the absolute best way to do it. However, I'm guessing because it's a vulnerable machine that they don't care about that. So what we can do is this. There's a thing called a reverse shell. And a reverse shell essentially is this. If I have a stateful firewall, okay, I'm behind a stateful firewall in my machine. The way a stateful firewall will operate is it will say, if any arbitrary responses or packets come from the outside in through my firewall, and I didn't ask for it, I didn't solicit it, then the firewall would say this is bad and block it, right? Deny. That's the typical way to do it. The stateful way of it means that if I actually, from the inside, ask for a page outside the firewall will record that request, and it will say, I am expecting this address that was asked to send a response. So if a response comes back from it, the firewall knows this was solicited. We're going to send it on through and give it to this person here, okay? So a lot of times they'll do these things they call reverse shells to try to trigger a client side to ask to join us, the bad guys out in the outside world, unwillingly or unknowingly, essentially in this case here. So we're trying to trigger that in this case here. But we want to actually get a reverse shell so we can actually have a command prompt to this server from our attack machine. Our attack machine in this case is my Kali Linux, and the server is here. So to do that, we can actually try to upload a reverse shell script that will actually trigger it when a user clicks on something on the page. Okay, so the intent is the person's going to click on it, therefore the request is going to sail through the firewall out as a solicited request. That's the idea. So in this case, I'm going to act as the user in this instance here. And we're going to actually make a PHP Reverse Shell. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and grab one from Kali. So in Kali, there's a location. I'm going to copy here. I'm going to say copy /usr/share web shells. And we're going to look for a PHP one because that's a typical language for the web pages that we have here. And I'm looking for a PHP injection ones, which is a reverse shell one. That one right there. So I want to copy that over to my root. And we're going to kind of screw around with it from there. So I'm going to pop it on over there. So if I do an ls, I see here that I have a PHP Reverse Shell right there. Okay? And the extension is .php. We're hoping it accepts it here. We don't know, but we'll see. But before we do that, we need to actually modify this. This is a reverse shell script from from a site called Pentest Monkey. And it gives a default connection IP and connection port number. So in other words, I need to put my attacking machine IP address and a port number that I pick at random for that reverse shell to connect to. Okay, so the victim out there is going to unwittingly click on the whatever I'm going to have them click on, but it needs to go and connect to something on my attack machine to be able to give me that shell. So what we're going to do is we're going to say nano, which is a command line text editor, and I don't want to hear anything about the Vi versus nano war. I don't really care about that. I like nano. So I'm going to say nano PHP. It reminds me of, what's that show? Silicon Valley, where the guy's telling the girl, I think it's about the spaces. She's like, she keeps typing space, and it just drives him nuts. He wants her to hit tab. He's like, I can't understand why people just do space, and they don't do tab. It's so funny. But he had mentioned something about how she said that she uses Vi and he uses nano or something like that. He's like, I can't be with you. So some people take this pretty seriously. Anyways, so I'm going to nano that, and it's going to put it up into a command line editor. And I'm going to scroll down here. So it tells you the instructions right here. It says change this. So it can't be more evident than that. So I'm actually going to put my IP address. Now, if you're using the try hack me, it's going to be your tunnel address. Now, when you do try hack me, you'll start up an open VPN connection, and that will give you a tunnel address. We're not talking about your ETH01. We're talking about your actual tunneled address right here. Okay. So in my case, it's this one right there. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and we're going to replace this with that because that's going to be the machine it's going to connect back to. And then I'm just going to pick my normal random port. I usually pick like 9200. I don't know why. I just do. So I'm going to put 9200. That's something to note right there. You got to remember that. So if you're using nano, then from there, you'll do a Control X, a Y, and Enter to get back here. So now that we got that bad boy, let's see if it accepts PHP. So we'll come back here and we'll see if it will take our sweet super shell. So we'll go back to root and we'll go down to our PHP Reverse Shell and submit. Bing. Okay. So extension not allowed. So does that mean we're dead in the water? Not necessarily. If you go to this website here called Payloads All the Things, they have a lot of great cheat sheets and evasion bypass cheat sheets and all kinds of cool stuff. They have one here for uploads. So if you look here under Upload Secure or Insecure, you'll see there's an extension, PHP, PDF, HTML. So these are some different ways you can do it. If you look at the extension PHP, something you'll notice is, yes, you do have your PHP extension, but look at this. PHP 3, PHP 4, PHP 5, 7, PHTML. So there's all kinds of different ones that are acceptable as a PHP extension. So it will still recognize it as a PHP file. It just can use a different extension. So this goes back to my discussion about blacklist. If I said blacklist, you can't have PHP, okay? You can't have PHP 3. You can't have PHP 4. But I don't say anything about PHTML or PHP 5 or 7. I can use those, right? That's why you don't use a blacklist. So we're hoping that's the case. What we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called Burp Suite. And I am going to do a separate video on Burp Suite and how to use it, but it is kind of the de facto web application testers tool. I use it in my real life work. I am a senior AppSec engineer where I work at, and I use the Burp Suite Pro Edition for absolutely everything that I do in my app testing. So it's pretty awesome. I love it. So what I did in this case here is I want to go ahead and use it. Let me go ahead and proxy back again here. I want to use it as what they call an intercepting proxy, okay? And what we do with this particular one here, by default, the options are set to 127.0.0.1:8080. The idea behind Burp Suite is I send a request to a web server. Normally, without Burp, it goes from my computer to the web server. Done. What if I, though, want to catch it before it gets to the web server? So the request is sent, I catch it, then I modify it, screw around with it, send it to the web server. That's the intent of Burp Suite. Okay? To do it, you actually have to set your Firefox or whatever you're using for your browser to be able to use that proxy. So in my Firefox, under Preferences, all the way down to the very bottom, you'll see a Settings button. And this is what I would set to be able to do it based off of the default options in Burp Suite. Of course, you can change that to anything you want. I just stick with the default. So I put this 127.0.0.1.80.80 and I say use it for all. Okay? That's what I do to set it. Now keep in mind, if you don't go back to system proxy settings when you're done with it, you'll never be able to get to the internet. It will say your proxy is refusing connection. That should tell you need to go to preferences and change it back. All right, so we're all set to intercept. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back here to my Burp Suite. And under proxy, there's a tab called intercept. So I'm going to click on intercept where it says intercept is off, and I'm going to turn it on. So now when I go back here and I look for that file and I hit submit, bing, it intercepts it. It never made it to the server, so I never got the error that said extension not allowed. What we're going to do is we're going to actually send this whole entire request to a different tool in Burp Suite. So at this request of this post, and we can see right here, here's the actual file being sent to the server. I'm going to right click this in the middle anywhere here, click send to intruder, and I'm going to turn the intercept off. Okay? So I don't really care that it goes back and says extension not allowed. I don't really care about that. We're going to now go over to the intruder where I had sent that request. Under positions, you're going to see the actual request. Over on the far right, I'm going to click the word clear, and it's going to remove all markings. And these markings are what they call, or for essentially placeholders. What I want to do is I want to insert a bunch of other different extensions in place of this in a rapid succession of requests being sent. Now, I could do it manually, right? I could go in there and make another file called this, PHP 3 or whatever, and just keep trying that, but it would take a long time. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to click add, and it's going to put a place marker here. And you'll see kind of what happens from there in the next part. I'm going to go over to payloads, and under payloads, I'm going to add some of the ones I saw here, like PHP 3, 4, right? So I'll add a few of those in here. So I'll say PHP 3, we'll add that in. I'll say PHP 4, we'll do PHP 5, and just to round it out, let's do PHTML, right? So I'm adding a few of these in here. What I'm saying is, hey Burp, when you send this request with Intruder quickly, I want you to, where it says PHP, I want you to insert PHP 3, send the request, and then insert PHP 4, send the request. All right, let's go ahead and click Start Attack. All right, so right here, there's something that is of interest to us. You see where it says 737 for length? All of them say that except for this one. So if we look at the one previous, the one that is a 737, and we look at the response, and we scroll down, it says extension not allowed. So we know that's the text length amount of data. That's whatever the response is for that, it's going to be 737 bytes. So this one's obviously different. So let's see what the response is here for this one. Look at that. Success. So that means it did allow PHTML. That wasn't in its blacklist. So now that we know that, and now that it's uploaded to the server, we can kind of guess that if we have an upload page, there's probably a directory, and we could have continued running our Gobuster to actually find this. And actually, that's a good exercise to do while I do this. Let me go ahead and just grab this for a second here and come back over here. This is a good exercise to try. So I can come back here to my Gobuster command, and right here for the address, now that I know about the internal one, I can see if there's an actual upload directory right there that I'm going to start from the internal one, so it speeds things up just a tad. So let's see if there's an upload directory. Look at that. Right off the bat, bang, uploads. So now we know there's an uploads directory. I'm going to Control C out of that. All right, let's get back over here now, and let's go get rid of this, and let's directly go to uploads. Now, a good web admin will disallow navigation to this or direct browsing to it. All right, so there it is, our PHP Reverse Shell, just waiting for this hapless user to click it and wreak havoc on the machine. But to do that, we actually have to start a listener. We have to be good listeners. So we're going to use a tool called Netcat. Netcat is a Swiss Army knife of... I'm sorry, I got thrown off for a second because I was starting to say something, and then I looked at the screen and I saw this @firefart. I'm like, what? Oh, man. I'm going to have to pause the video. That is too funny. That caught my attention. I was like, what? Anyways, Netcat is a tool that allows us to do TCP, UDP type of connections. And we can use it for reverse shell connections. We can, don't try dropping it on somebody's system, because most likely it will be picked up by antivirus. Antivirus flags this executable all the time. So we're going to start a listener on this attack machine on port 9200, because that's what we set in that PHP script, okay? And we're hoping that when the user clicks on that uploaded file, it will connect back to my machine and give me a shell on the victim. So we're going to say, NC TAC NLVP. The TAC N is for no DNS resolution. The L, lowercase l, is for a listener. It's not a persistent listener. That would be uppercase L. V is for verbose, and P is for port. So we're going to say 9200 for the port. And you can see it's just kind of hanging here, waiting for some input to do a little pop, 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 pop. So let's go ahead back here, and let's click on our sweet little PHP Reverse Shell. So we've clicked on it, and you'll notice it's just kind of hanging there. Well, if we come back here, look at that. Pop, 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 another server drop. We got a little shell action going on here. But this particular shell action is only it's not a very stable one due to something they call TTY from back in the old school days when they had terminals that you would use and stuff. Anyways, in my write-up that will be on the same page as this video, I go into a little more detail explaining the reason why this would be an unstable shell. So to get a more stable shell, we can actually use a Python script to do that. So I have that here. And this one I always keep on ready dial because it's usually those type of shells that we get. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this in here. This will essentially give us a new bash shell essentially as a more stable shell. And when I say shell, if you're not familiar, that's this right here. This is the terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. Okay, so you can see our shell changed now to an actual name, www-data Vulnversity. So if I do an ID, it looks like we're www-data. Okay, so that's who we are on this machine. Usually a good thing to do is do an ls where you're at. Okay, looks like I'm here at the top of the root system, of the file system, I'm sorry. And a good place to go look for our first flag would probably be the home directory. So let's go ahead and navigate over to home. And we see a bill. All right, so let's cd over to bill. And let's see what we can see. All right, ls. All right, so there's a user.txt. If we do an ls tacl, it'll tell us who has what permissions to do what on this machine. So here is the permission sets. The way they work is the first 3 octet area here is read, write, execute. The first section is for owner of the file. The next 3 is for the group of where that file is associated with. And the last is for everybody else. So in this case, we can see that the owner has read-write privileges, no execute, and that the group has read privileges and everybody else has read privileges, which tells me I can read this file, and it's probably the first flag. To read it in the terminal, we use the word cat. So I'll say cat, and then the name of the file. So we'll say user cat user.txt. Bang! There you go, right there. There's our first flag. So I'm guessing in the try hack me, that's the first thing that's asked. Okay, compromise the web server. There it is right there. So the guy's name is Bill. Here's the first flag. Sweet. All right, so that's the first part of it. Next is privilege escalation. And let's see here. SUID. So it looks like they're probably going to use the SUID bit. Very cool. Interesting. So it looks like we're looking for this flag here. So root/root/root.txt. That's our huckleberry that we want to find next. So to do that, for privilege escalation, a common technique used, and you'll see it probably in like 4 of my videos so far in the series that I've done this, is something called a SUID bit. Think of it as, if you're from the Windows environment, think kind of like a run as admin type of scenario. You're the owner of a file, but you do want to have people, you do want to give everybody else, every other user, the ability to run your file as if it were you, under the context of you. Now, you don't want to give them all of your privileges, which would be, paramount to like doing sudo for everything. But you do want them to run this one particular executable as if it were you. So a good example of that is passwd. So if I locate passwd, which is, I'll tell you what it is here in a second, right here. Oh, where's it at? That's not the one I'm looking for. Bin, this one right here. So whenever you're on Linux and you want to change your, there we go. Whenever you're on Linux and you want to change your password, you would basically try to, you would use a tool called passwd to be able to do that. And you know what? I think I just closed my shell. Oh, man, I did. How stupid. All right. Hold on 1 second. Let me start. I don't know why I did that. So let me listen back on this bad boy again. Let's come back over here. And let's see. Let's go back and see if we can do this again. There we go. All right. Let's try to reestablish my shell here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go back and do my Python TTY. It's when I start explaining things, I start losing track of what I've done. All right, there we go. So anyways, passwd is an example of one that it does need a root privilege level to actually execute. So if I'm a standard user and I need to use it, I need to be able to run it as if it were root, right? So that one has a SUID bit attached to it. And what that would look like, in this case, if I did an ls tac l and I said /usr/bin passwd/passwd. So if I did that, you'll notice over here that instead of the X, where it says RW and it should have an X for executable, you'll notice it has an S, and that stands for SUID bit. And that means, well, this is already set for SUID. And you can run it in the context of root. So what we want to do in this case is we want to actually look for any file on this victim machine that has the SUID bit set. An example would be if they had an older version of Nmap and it had a SUID bit set for it. A typical privilege escalation would be to run that Nmap in interactive mode and then do an !sh to get a shell as root. So that would be an example of something we look for. So to find all files on this machine, starting from the root top of the file system, this is the command we would do. We'd say find, and then a slash indicating the top of the file system is where I want to start my search. Then we'll say tac perm, and then we'll say tac 4000. That would be an indicator, a numerical indicator for the SUID bit. And then I'll say tac type F. That means I'm looking for a file. Any files that have the SUID bit permission attached to it. And to get rid of all the verbose junk that I would see for maybe some errors or whatever it may be, I'm going to throw all other output that's garbage, that has no relativeness to what I'm trying to do. I'm going to throw it in something they call a garbage collector. To do that, it looks like bracket slash dev slash null. So shoot it down the pie hole. All right, so let's run that. And what did I type in something wrong? Let's see here. Find slash. Interesting. Well, just to verify, make sure I'm not missing any typing. Let me come back here and run it that way. Sometimes I forget my spaces, or maybe I do 2 dashes instead of 1, which is probably what I did. Yep, I can see it already. I did 2 dashes for perm instead of 1. All right, so now it's looking for any files that have the SUID bit. We're going to take a look at them. We're going to see which ones are possibly odd for having SUID on them. So these ones are pretty common. We see these all the time. There's that passwd. Oops, what happened? I must have hit something by accident here. Okay. So let's take a peek and see. Snap find. Pinger, that's an interesting one there. So SQUID proxy. So this one's interesting here. Systemctl is not typically something you would run or allow to run as either sudo or SUID bit, because it's actually what starts and stops services, like your Apache service, things like that. So yeah, that's odd that that's that way. So what we can do is we can see if this has any type of privilege escalation capability for Systemctl. To do that, there's a web page that almost everybody goes to for that kind of information. It's called GTFO bins. I love it. So in GTFO bins, this will give you a lot of privilege escalation scripts that you can use. So let's type in Systemctl. There it is. So we're not really looking for the sudo because it doesn't actually have sudo. We are looking for one that with the SUID bit. So it does have the SUID bit set. So let's click it. All right. So if the binary has the SUID bit set, it does not drop the elevated privileges and may be abused to access the file system, escalate, or maintain privilege access. We don't need to run this because we already have a file that has SUID on it. So we don't need that. So this is what we're looking to do. Is this stuff right here. So when you're talking about these services here with Systemctl, like I said, this has to do with starting and stopping of services. The goal in this case is the text file that has the root flag in it is under /root/root.txt. We would like to utilize Systemctl to read that on that system and then output the results of it to a file. Let's say we put it in the temp directory of the victim machine and we call it output or something like that. Okay, that's the goal of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to necessarily elevate ourselves to root and start navigating around root. We want to use Systemctl to see if it will, if we can create a new service using Systemctl in its capability of SUID to make a one-shot executable to do like a bin bash command. So if we can get it to run as root, creating a new service, bin bash, to run a cat command for root/root.txt, put that into a file and stuff it over in temp. If we can do that, then we can just navigate to temp and go read the file from there without ever having to have compromised the root account. That's the idea behind it. And all of this stuff you see here has to do with that. Now, in my write-up that I put on the page on the website under this video, I go into detail about what each one of these mean, and I give an example on there on how to create a service using what you see here. So I'll leave that for you to read from the web page, and we'll just go ahead and tackle this part here. Now, we're not going to do it exactly like that. So what we'll change is I'll probably just change the name. I don't know, we'll call it pop. Sounds good. And we'll probably just do bin bash instead of bin sh. This will make sure that we can run a particular command. So here we'll say like cat, and then we'll say root/root.txt, and then we'll do a bracket to the right to output it to a file like temp/output. And then we'll make a link out of it, and then we'll go visit the page. That's the goal. All right, now that we understand the goal, I have actually, ahead of time, put all that here conveniently. And so let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing we'll do is we'll make our first service variable, and we'll just do it here. Now you can just do this directly within the terminal line by line, or you can do it as a full script. I'm just going to do it line by line. Okay, so we'll put our first one in there. Next, we'll go over here. We'll echo service because that's what Systemctl is all about. It's for starting and stopping services, and you'll see down here, that's where we'll actually enable and start that service there. All right, so let's go ahead and pop that bad boy in. So that should now echo at a prompt. Excellent. All right, so at that prompt, we want to let it know it's a one-shot deal and to just kind of destroy it when it's done. We don't need it for anything but this one thing. And this is what we want to execute. So we're going to do a bin bash. This will tell it to go ahead and run it as the binary, under the root privilege. So we're going to have it do a cat root.txt, and we're going to output it to the temp directory with the name output. That'll be the name of the file. So let's copy that. Okay, no errors. I'm doing good so far. That's why I do this, because I always fat finger and always get a bunch of errors. All right, so next then it goes into the install portion of it here. And this wanted by multi-user target pop thing here, I list in my actual file that I put for the walkthrough on the actual web page for this. But essentially, the idea of, trying to think of how I can, it's basically saying something like it could start and run at levels 3, levels 4, levels 5, and we're talking about like ring level type of things. So we're specifying a blanketed approach of how many could actually use this, depending on what user ID we've broken in as. That's kind of why we're doing that there, and we're doing it based off of the variable that we had created earlier. And again, this is a little bit more involved than some of the other videos I've done, but my document will explain a lot of it. All right, so this is where it's a little bit different than the GTFO. I actually have to specify because this is in bin Systemctl. If you were to just follow this, it would error out because your directory you're in may not be bin. So that's what they would show. So you got to make sure you modify that. Don't do that, step by step through that. All right, so let's go ahead and make that system link to that. And now let's go back and make our final enabling of our service so we can rock and roll with it. Pop that back over. Awesome. So now in the victim machine, you want to navigate over to var. Oops, var. Is it var? No, I'm sorry, temp. TMP. You want to navigate over to temp, and let's take a list of what we have, and there it is right there, output. That's the one we want. All right, so let's cat that output, and it should have our flag. Pop, 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 another server drop, love and life, all is good. Right there is our flag. We basically pulled it out from here, right there, pulled out the flag without ever having to break in as root and having to navigate directly as root to the root directory. We just used a SUID binary to be able to go ahead and ask for that, saying, hey, can you tell me what's in that root.txt file, and stuff it in this file called output. And then we just navigated over to temp and looked at the output. And that, my friends, is how you pop Vulnversity. Pretty cool little thing here. And let's make sure that's the case. Yep, right there. And there's the bin Systemctl that they use. Awesome. Everything looks good. So we learned quite a few things in this particular video here. We learned our basic Nmap stuff as before. We learned about file uploads and how you can use different extensions to be able to try to bypass the file uploads that they have. We also learned never to use a blacklist. Always use a whitelist if at all possible. We learned some different things about services. We didn't get super deep on the video about that, but in the document that I'll have for a walkthrough on the web page, you will be able to see a detailed breakdown of what each one of those commands mean, because I'm all about making sure you understand the methods and you're not just some script kiddie nerd that's just pop and throwing all these commands in just because I told you. I want you to understand what the heck you're running, right? I want you to say, hey, I know why I'm doing this, and I know the order of what I'm doing here to be able to replicate it again for another box that I may try to break. So that's the best way to do it, in my opinion. So I hope you enjoyed the video. The next one, I don't know what we'll pick. We'll just pick another one for our next series in pop, another server drop. Until next time, peace out, players.